Well, that is awesome then.
And we're recording. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Alliance for Just Money Coffeehouse. We've been in action already for a couple of years, more than that. My name is Robert Schuler. I'll be hosting and moderating this session. Let me see how many new people there are here. Brett B, Clark Joseph H, Peter S. So for their sake. So we're an organization promoting monetary reform and monetary theory, correct monetary theory. For the reform side, we have a bill that we try to promote. It's called the NEED Act. And I invite you to explore our website and other websites where they're talking about the NEED Act. If you'd like to get more involved, check out on our website to become a member. And if you're a member, check out the possibilities to get active in committees. We got 3-4 active committees, and we need some more hands on deck. That's for sure. Also to be mentioned really nicely, we're in the process of organizing a Just Money Festival. And this will happen on July 23rd in the evening. That's a Friday. And then throughout the next Saturday, throughout the day on the 24th. An email to the big list will go out very soon, probably tomorrow, with further details. We all hope to see you there and that you keep your agenda open for that event. Let's go to tonight's topic. Central bank digital currency, friend or foe? That's a big question. We'll be doing this with Ben Rininger. Ben was, for the last 5 months, an intern at the Alliance, and I had the pleasure to be his supervisor, and we had a ball. We learned a lot from him. I hope he learned a lot from us, and I keep apologizing for dragging him into philosophy. Anyway, for this Coffeehouse, he wrote a little article, and the URL I will later share. Before we start, some rules of the road. We have a little rule that we ask people to refrain from using the chat feature during the presentation, out of respect for the moderator and the presenter, so that there's no distraction. But once we get into the Q&A, use it to your at will. When we go into the Q&A, we will do the, you'll have to raise your hand, your digital hand, to get in line to pose a question. So at the bottom of your screen, you find something that says reactions with a little smiley. If you click on that, there's a little board with possibilities. At the bottom, it says raise hands, something I'm doing now. And then you can also, again, lower it. Somebody here will keep track of who is first, and then we'll go by in chronological order. This is all I have to say for, no, one more thing. I'm gonna do a quick share screen, because I just want to be sure that when, we have done so many coffee houses, and we have a track of those coffee houses. And I hope you can see our homepage, Change Our Money, Change Our World, for the Islands of Just Money. If you click on resources, and then go to archive, that might take a little bit. Then you'll find a whole set there of previous newsletters where you find a lot of information, previous reports and campaigns. Last one is our call for nominations for our governing board. And if you go a little further down on the left, you see the coffee houses and study stacks. going back quite a while. Not all have the recordings ready, but let's say for the last year, we have provided the recordings, and I have been making study stacks, and that has been taken over by Joe Polito, who promised me to be here, but I think he will join soon. Anyway, that's just for those who are monetarily curious and want more information. Anyway, let's start and give the floor to Ben. Ben, go ahead.
Hello. Sorry for interrupting. It's Joe Polito here. I keep getting tossed out of the Zoom session. I don't know why.
Joe?
Yes?
Why don't you rename yourself? We weren't sure who this was.
Oh, what am I named?
Bo Young Lim.
I'm listed Bo Young?
Yes.
Oh, maybe because of the link I chose. I don't know. Okay,
So
sorry about that. Yeah.
Change your name, it'll be fine.
Right, okay.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
She probably used a link of hers that's somehow connected to her name. Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right.
Yeah, that happened to me too. So that makes sense. That's how that
I'm
happened.
glad we're making sense of the world. It's what we're supposed to do here. Part of what our mission at AFJM is understanding how things work. So without further ado, I will use that as a segue for me to start my talk about how central bank digital currency works. So I'm going to go into presentation mode and go from there. So central bank digital currency, what is it? Why should you care about it? Significance, and should we support it in any form? So to start off, to try and clear up some confusion, we're going to start off with recognizing the fact that central bank digital currency can be confusing. You know, it's not well defined. And I don't know who here has read my article or not, but I talked about this good document in my article, is that really CBDC, it doesn't refer to one type of money. It refers to a large variety of different forms that money could take. And really, and what it ultimately is, you know, something that a money created by the central bank, so not by private banks, as most money in our economy is created, but by our central bank. And it's different from the current form of money that central banks create. That's the biggest thing. So I guess anything that falls into that definition, you would say is central bank digital currency. But then again, not exactly. And this is something I really didn't formally address that much in my article, because if you think of it, US money in the NEED Act, what we propose here at the Alliance, that, I mean, it's created by a monetary authority. So it's not the same thing as our current central bank, but it's still created by a central entity. Yet that isn't considered CBDC. It's not in the dialogue, the current dialogue in banking and policy circles about CBDC. So I guess a third thing that could be added into this definition is that, well, it's a form of money, you know, things we use as a medium of exchange, created by a central bank, different from what was currently created by the central bank, but also among all the types that are currently in the dialogue. And we'll talk about many of those types further in this presentation. So what is CBDC? So to a great extent, CBDC can be thought of as digital cash. It exists within or without a sovereign money system. Unlike physical cash, CBDCs could be exchanged without the involvement of private banks. And as in most of these cases that I've seen, is a debt-free form of money. Like the US money in the NEED Act. In most cases, it's something that is accessible and used by regular people, you and I, not just the financial institutions. And because anyway. And so CBDCs could be, but likely will not be, similar to cryptocurrencies, using the same ledger technology that Bitcoin uses. And when I first started studying CBDC and reading into it, that is where I got the line in the beginning of this slide that CBDC could be thought of as digital cash, because that's what a lot of the things is the type of CBDs that are really in the news are the ones that, you know, functionally and legally are just like cash, things that a type of money that people own, not something that a type of money that they're owed. You think about, you know, the money in your bank account, you know, your demand deposit, your checking account, your saving account. Those types of money is money you're owed that that you have the authority to use at any time with the bank as your agent to do that. But it's not money that you own like cash. And similarly, CBDC could be like cash. You know, it could be maintained by a cryptocurrency system, but it could also not be. And that's a key thing to note. And I think likely, from what all I've read, it won't be. But a lot of what you see in the news, specifically in the crypto world news, you know, people that are really into cryptocurrency and all the websites associated with cryptocurrency act as if they will be using, CBDs will use the blockchain technology. But in fact, that's not all of what a CBDC is or could be. So this is, I think, the most useful chart there is for CBDC right here. This chart shows all the categories, like 4, you know, categories that are kind of binary categories. Is money widely accessible, meaning regular people rather than privileged institutions with certain legal rights that others don't have? You know, is it available to everybody or a select group of people? This is defined by law. That's the widely accessible. Digital or physical. Issued by the central bank, not issued by the central bank. Token-based, not token-based. And we'll talk about that last one in a later slide. But you can see from these other categories, you know, I think this is just a great visual to understand what CBDC is. And it's really, if you hear CBDC talked about anywhere, academic circles, the news, it's one of these 3 things. It's that's in dark gray here. And so what do you see? Obviously, they're all digital, and they're all, and the 2 real big things is that they're digital and central bank issued. And then, oh, sorry, go back a slide. Digital and central bank issued. Why is this thing in light gray not counted? Because it's something that's digital and central bank issued, but it already exists. And so that's what differentiates the dark gray really from the light gray, is that you know, the light gray already exists. And these other forms, they're different because 1, it's widely accessible. You can look at this dark gray section right here that says central bank accounts, general purpose. This would be like if you had an account at the central bank, where, you know, you like, rather than having an account at your own bank, you have an account at the central bank where you could be owed specific amount of money on behalf of the central bank. Notice that this type of central bank currency, though, doesn't necessarily have to be debt-free, as a central bank, like private banks, potentially create this type of money through loans. So just keep that in mind, you know, but like this type of money, but you would have an account directly with the central bank. And that's what makes it different than other central bank created money, where, you know, reserves and settlements accounts that only the central bank could use it. And then we'll talk about these other types a little bit further in later slides. Now, token-based versus account-based CBDCs. So this quote right here in the upper paragraph is, you know, from a bank, like a manager at the Bank for International Settlements, kind of like a central bank for the central bank, if you will, or for the central banks of the world. And what he's basically saying in this quote is essentially that he's expecting an account-based CBDC as being more likely than a token-based CBDC. So he does not see a future in which CBDC fits into this column or this section. So what does it mean?
I have a question.
Yes.
What is a CBDC?
What is a CBDC? It's a form of
Yes.
money that is created by a central bank, different than current forms of money created by central banks.
All right, thank you. I joined a little bit late, but I hope that's fine with you.
Oh, that's fine. No, it's cool.
They always say the late person gets everything.
The late person gets everything. Oh, okay. Anyway, what was I saying? So, what does it mean for a currency to be token based versus account based? And I think the most eloquent way to understand this is in the statements: "I know, therefore I own," token based central bank digital currency, versus "I am, therefore I own." I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Okay, so, and I think I stated this pretty well in the article that I wrote. I know, therefore I own central bank digital currency. You could think of it like this, where knowing a certain password allows you to use that currency, but verification of your identity is in no way necessary for you to use that currency. And you know, the token-based central bank digital currency, the idea is tightly linked with the idea of using blockchain or what's called distributed ledger technology, or DLT, using the same technology that cryptocurrency uses. But a good way of thinking of token-based CBDC is, imagine like there's a certain that, you know, a certain key, right? A cryptocurrency key is associated with a certain wallet, right? That wallet has, it's all digital, but it's just, think of it like a physical wallet, a certain amount of money in it. And you can think of knowing the private key as being akin to owning that wallet that has the money in it. Now, just like I could use money out of a wallet that is not mine, would be criminal, would be wrong, morally wrong to do, you can use money out of a cryptocurrency wallet that is not yours, provided that you knew the cryptocurrency key. That's what it would fundamentally mean for a cryptocurrency to be token-based, is that just simply knowing a key would be akin to having it. And in many ways, it would be fundamentally, the money you would be using would be fundamentally like cash in that way, only digital. Similar concept with wallets and money in wallets. The only difference really being is knowing a key is equivalent to physically having a wallet on your person. Whereas a cryptocurrency is account-based. You need to verify that you are the person that owns the money in order to use the money. You know, and that, you know, that is the fundamental difference. And this manager from the BIS right here states that he doesn't think that a central bank digital currency would be token-based, mainly because he thinks that making it token-based would make it very easy for all kinds of fraud and other things to occur. Just like, you know, not fraud, but, you know, like money laundering, crime, terrorism, tax evasion. He lists it all there. Drug crime. You think just think about a lot of the things that are criminal, like you know, like narcotics, and how they're mostly like all the transactions with them are normally done with using cash. A lot of people think that similar transactions would be done with the token-based cryptocurrency, just like many token-based central bank digital currency, just like many criminal things are done with cryptocurrencies. So that's that. So general purpose versus wholesale.
A retail CBDC would be used like a digital extension of cash by all people and companies, whereas a wholesale
I'm sorry.
I removed them. They were muting and unmuting, so I just removed him.
Who's this guy who's rudely interrupting the presentation? And who
Yeah.
came late?
I've removed them.
Great.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, Ben.
No, it's cool. It's fine. So yeah, a retail CBDC would be like a digital extension of cash by all people, companies, whereas a wholesale CBDC could be used only by permitted institutions as a settlement asset in the interbank market. That's what this essentially says. So yeah, just this is as succinct as it could be at the bottom. Retail, people and private non-bank companies, wholesale, banking institutions only. The general purpose, it can be used by everybody. And so I guess the difference between retail and general purpose is that retail, it excludes banks. It would just be companies and people through central, like exchanging money through central bank accounts. All right, so that's that. CBDCs versus cryptocurrencies. So I mentioned a good bit of this earlier. But yeah, CBDCs, if created, would be issued and regulated by the banks, the central banks, of the world, versus private cryptocurrencies, which are issued and created by miners. Now, I don't know how much the people in this crowd and everybody in this crowd is interested in monetary reform, so I would assume you have like a good idea of cryptocurrency. But the essence of Bitcoin and all these privately created money that people put faith in is that when Bitcoin comes into circulation, when miners, the people that verify that mine Bitcoin through verifying transactions with existing Bitcoin users, they bring new money into existence because they're rewarded with money, rewarded with Bitcoin as for their work of verifying transactions of people that are already using Bitcoin. And I included this link here at the bottom that I think is one of the best videos I've ever watched that succinctly explained to me how Bitcoin functionally works. I think this is a really good video for the layman, and perhaps I could put it into the chat when I'm done with this presentation, if I remember. Or if you give me your email, I could share this on Google Drive with anybody. This link, this whole presentation at the end. This is a good link right here. And as well as at the very end of my presentation, I have a link to all the sources I've used for my research that like a lot of 50-page, really more in-depth explanations of CBDC than this presentation. But yeah, CBDC be created by the central bank, and they could use and what this says basically here is that if they do use blockchain technology, it would be probably in accordance with their own central bank's interest, or rather the interests of the political class, the people that are in charge of creating and overseeing our central bank. And so this is just another reason that I don't think that and I don't think, and many other people don't think that central CBDC really would use a blockchain technology, especially a permissionless blockchain technology we'll discuss later, is that we really think that it doesn't make sense that a CBDC would see it as in its own, a central bank would see it in its own interest to allow such incredible anonymity that currencies created through blockchain technology may afford. And there's other things with that we'll discuss in later slides as well. This is very simple. So CBDC is direct/one-tiered, a central bank directly administers. So think a one-tiered CBDC would be like this. What if everybody in a world with CBDC, everybody in this Zoom chat could have their own account with the central bank, where they could call it a Fed account, right? And it would be just like a kind of like a public option for Venmo, pretty much, where you could exchange your digital dollars with one another, just like you can exchange dollars with Venmo, but the central bank would be managing it all. Private banks of any sort would not at all be involved in a direct tiered CBDC. Whereas indirect or two-tiered CBDC, it's like the central bank creates the money, but then private banks can have a role in administering said money, being an intermediary of some sorts. So that's that distinction. There are many distinctions, binary distinctions with what money could be. And so that's just another one. Centralized versus decentralized CBDC is a good graphic right here, as well as permission versus permissionless distributive ledger technology. So looking to centralized versus distributed ledger technology, essentially the difference regards verification. In a centralized system, one entity verifies all transactions between participants. This would be like the central bank. Would be like the Fed account I mentioned in the previous slide, where there's one Fed account, and all transactions between Fed accounts of the CBDC are verified by the one entity, the central bank. Whereas decentralized technology for analyzing transactions between individuals involves multiple entities. And then distributed ledger technology is different from decentralized technology insofar as everyone can kind of see the transactions going on. When you think of Bitcoin and miners, is you could have as many miners as possible work together to verify a transaction. The more miners that verify a transaction, the more, I guess, like reliable and trustworthy that transaction is. And I think that video and the couple links back, I think, explains this much better. There's permission versus permissionless distributed ledger technology right here. Here's another article. But in my next slide, I think this is a really good graphic that explains what it means to have a blockchain technology for organizing financial transactions be permissionless versus permissioned. And, I guess a couple highlights in this is that, well, permissionless blockchain, it just means that anybody could join into the system. No central authority needs to verify it. Anybody could, if they could purchase the technology, become a Bitcoin miner, get Bitcoin that way. Now, most people who own Bitcoin in the United States use employees, sign up with some business who would ultimately get the Bitcoin from somewhere else, purchase it, mine it, have themselves. But anybody could join. Whereas permissioned, it's like a central authority needs to approve you joining the system that verifies all transactions. That's the fundamental difference. In order to make a decentralized system that anybody could join without having to verify anybody's identity or anything, you really need to use the advanced technology that really has come out only in just a little bit over a decade, that blockchain technology, which I don't understand that much in depth myself. I'm much more so looking at the institutional differences between these forms of money than the technological differences. But regardless, if you're going to use a blockchain technology that allows these identityless transactions to happen between people where anybody can join, it requires a lot of energy. And that's the big disadvantage with permissionless. It makes it, that again, also adds into the fact that I don't think a CBDC with blockchain created by our central bank is a likely thing in the United States. So, and that's what I talk about in this slide here, which you guys can all gaze your eyes upon. If we just look at how much energy just Bitcoin uses versus the entire country of the Netherlands, which makes both cryptocurrency and CBDC not likely forms of money for the future. But that said, there are other types of cryptocurrency that are not permissionless, like Ethereum, that don't afford, Ethereum doesn't afford the same privacy anonymity that Bitcoin does, but it is a lot more energy efficient. And a lot of major corporations have started to adopt Ethereum versus Bitcoin. Anyway, so that's another point. But before I move further and bridge the next part of this presentation, I believe Mike has a question, has something he wants to clarify.
Yes, correct, Ben. First of all, thanks for presenting. You're doing a great job here. Don't listen to those crazy people who are trying to distract. Let me just say that it sounds Bitcoin mining is done by verifying transactions. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And I'll put the link in the chat, which again, yeah, that is how Bitcoin mining is done. That's what fundamentally Bitcoin miners do. Now, when a Bitcoin...
Well, hang on now, Ben, really quickly. It's my understanding that Bitcoin mining has to do with solving complex mathematical computations, and that the ledger activities are separated from that. They are different, and they are treated differently.
Well, from what I understand, these algorithms that people work to solve, the solving of the algorithms itself helps to verify the transaction. It's been a long time since I've watched that video. Is that I'm going to put in the chat as soon as this presentation is over. But I'm pretty sure that the actions are one and the same. That solving the algorithm, and it gives you, it doesn't necessarily earn you Bitcoin, but it's somewhat of a lottery system that you have a certain chance of earning Bitcoin by taking part in the process of solving the algorithm. And so the more miners there are, the more people working to verify transactions, the less likely you are to win that lottery of some sorts to get the Bitcoin for yourselves. And that is how the supply growth of Bitcoin is fundamentally controlled over time. And where I think there's a set year where the last Bitcoin ever is supposed to be created, and that is 2140, I believe. But yeah, I do believe that the act of miners of solving these algorithms in a certain convoluted way that I've forgotten how it works, does work to solve transactions. And you can watch the video I'm going to put in the chat, but I have nothing else to really comment. That's just the way that I understand how it works.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Maybe we revisit that subject later on. All
right, sounds good. So some other significant features of CBDC. So big differences between CBDC versus the money in our bank accounts is that, they'd be closer to cash than the demand deposits as a form of money. If we're talking about, institutionally and legally, so they could use DLT, but as I've covered in the last couple slides, I don't think they will. I think that's all speculation. When you hear in the news that CBDC will be like cryptocurrency, I don't think so. At the very least, you will not have a permissionless blockchain technology used for CBDC. As we know, the effects on energy for that. But you potentially could see a permissioned one. But even then, from what I've read, a lot of countries aren't even wanting to use the permissioned one. Like China in the central bank digital currency that they're pioneering, they are not planning on using a permissioned form of central bank, like permissioned or permissionless DLT system for the central bank digital currency that they want to create. So yeah, and this is the third big difference from the current form of money that most people use, is that the idea of having a public option where central banks could have their own citizens have accounts with them, rather than the current system where, you know, only banks have accounts at the central bank. And this is another link you could visit on your own time. Just give me your email in the chat and I will forward this presentation, share this presentation with you on Google Drive, and you can look through all the links. I think I have a rich variety of links here. So why should the average person care about CBDCs? And the answer is that, well, it's, you know, regardless of whether you care about the system works, I believe everybody who would attend this Zoom meeting cares about how the system works. But the system is going to have an effect on you as everybody uses money. And, money, in the form that money takes, affects the nature of many economic transactions throughout our economy. Many changes systemic changes that could come with a new form of central bank money include, monetary policy effectiveness. And I said coupled with legal changes is that the central bank has no authority to create a CBDC right now. This would have to come through legal changes. But if, the authority of the central bank to create a CBDC was bestowed upon our central bank, the Federal Reserve, you could see monetary policy or decisions by the Federal Reserve having an effect a lot more quickly. As when the Federal Reserve, affects interest rates, how much money is created, which in turn affects, how investments and consumption spending and so on and so forth. The effects of monetary authority actions, of Fed actions, are not that immediate, as ultimately private banks are the creators of money. The Fed tries to control the money supply. It tries to, and it influences interest rates, but who fundamentally creates money are private banks. But if you allow central banks to create money during a recession in the form of CBDC and give it to people in citizens' accounts, either give it to them, they could create the asset and the liability at the same time, or they could potentially just loan out money to citizens. In either form, the central bank could immediately affect consumer demand and other things in the economy if they had this central bank digital currency, which would likely imply more direct control. And I think that's a pretty huge thing that could come with CBDC. But yeah, potential seigniorage. I mean, again, what makes CBDC so confusing is it's referring to so many different things. So what we're talking about, it can be confusing, but CBDC could potentially be, again, this would be coupled with other legal changes, but could be a form of money that, the government could spend into existence, as well as, I say, credit guidance. So, if the central bank digital currency is lending this money into existence, it could lend it to different institutions for infrastructure projects and so on. And credit guidance is this idea that the government works to influence where newly created credit goes in society. So I know Richard Werner, the economist, talks a lot about this, how a lot of newly created money, and a lot of people in monetary reform circles talk about this, how a lot of newly created money goes after pre-existing assets, homes, stocks, et cetera, that, rather than investment projects that create new things of value to society. And so we see housing price inflation, and we'd be better served if more loans were going towards investment projects. He talks about, having the government guide, or at least nudge where newly created loans go to in society. He thinks it would be a good thing. Credit guidance. That's not just a gist of that idea, but again, central bank digital currency ultimately gives the central bank more control, ultimately, because it gives the central bank authority to create a new form of money. It gives them new powers. So you have that, and many people think that would lessen private bank privilege as well, giving that more power to the central authority in many regards. So this is just one to counter that directly. But in fact, before I go to talk about this slide, I believe Don Wilford has a question.
Look, so thanks for taking the question. Look, it's not so much a question. You haven't used the word climate change yet. And the reason I bring that up is COVID is, and it would have crashed capitalism if government had not been able to fund individuals and pump money into the economy. So what central bank personal accounts or digital currency means is that the government can put money into your personal account at the central bank. If you think that the climate change is actually climate crisis, and in future we're going to need a mechanism for bailing people out, not only people but corporations too, then everybody's going to need an account at the central bank, because otherwise they actually put money in private sector bank accounts in the hope that the money will somehow find itself to individuals. So the real compelling, I think, reason for central bank digital currency, it's not about cryptocurrency. That's a completely separate issue. It's about individuals having accounts at the central bank so that the central bank can flow money into your economy, so that if something like COVID happens or a crisis happens and you're going to starve or lose your home, the government can pump money into not just the economy in general, but to your personal economy. And I think we're going to need it. So there you go. That's my comment.
It's a good comment. And I would just say that a big difference with central bank digital currencies, the government, we saw through stimulus checks that the government can, put money into people's pockets in times of emergency, but that required a lot of political will. Whereas if you have a Fed account and the Fed was given some authority to create money for consumers to spend, that would ultimately be a bureaucratic decision rather than a more direct political one. I guess that's an advantage in some people's eyes during times of crisis. It's also seen as a disadvantage in other people's eyes because they think that, they don't believe a monetary authority could be independent in making that decision, that whatever administration's in charge, who's appointing many of these officials at the monetary authority, may pressure monetary authority central bank to create money to political actors' own political benefit, even if it might not be in the nation's long run interest. So that's like a pro-con view of that issue. But and so that's definitely is it's something that's of great concern to people about CBDC. But I have only had enough time to read this slide while I've been talking, but this is just an example of how what people fear with CBDC. Which the main thing that people fear with CBDC, as talked about in this top paragraph, is this idea that money would go away if that cash money, physical cash, the stuff you have in your wallet, would go away if CBDC was created, because people would just have a virtual form of cash that functionally and legally is the same thing as cash. And so the central bank could just rip cash under the rug. And what this person's talking about, and the link is in the slides, but is this idea that, if all currency was digital, then people would have no ability, to go and withdraw their money from private banks at any given time, which he believes gives private banks more power. I dismiss this concern mainly because I don't think that, that cash, you necessarily need to get rid of cash if you're going to create a CBDC. I don't think you need to do both. I think you can keep cash and have a CBDC. Moreover, this concern of a bail-in, I don't think it would ever happen. That's something that Americans would tolerate politically. And CBDC could also be designed in a way, that Yeah, this other one it talks about privacy, that this idea that the government could have information about every transaction you ever make. If in regards to your digital wallet with government. So that's another concern people have, is privacy. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what I wrote. I genuinely just forgot what I wrote. I forgot about this slide. Oh, okay. This is a concern about bank runs. So this is the idea that you create a central bank digital currency that you would have more bank runs, in that when there's a financial crisis, people would be like, well, I know I could count on my central bank money even if my private bank goes under. So they'll try and convert all their existing cash into CBDC. Now there's ways to kind of lessen this effect. And that is, the central bank money doesn't pay any interest versus the money you hold at your bank pays interest. That's an incentive to still keep it at your private bank. As well as limiting, the government can also cap how much money you could keep at the central bank. So there's other ways to go with that concern, but that concern still remains. So these are just a bunch of questions to have to think about. That like this is an article I read where some person who's really afraid of CBDCs talks about his fears. And, and the biggest fears are power, monetary authority, independence, privacy.
Ben, you muted yourself.
I didn't mean to mute myself. I'm sorry. Sorry for all these technical difficulties. We had a lot of them. But biggest concerns, was would it be easier to governments to create a system like that of the Chinese social credit system? This is what somebody was arguing. And I guess the thing to remember, and this is kind of like, directly tied with, privacy, is this idea that if your main intermediary is the state, people are afraid that the state's going to use that and abuse that for its own interests, or the people who control the state at any given point in time interest. I'm just kind of leaving these as open questions. I don't have exact answers to them. But I think these are just things to think about. It's my belief on the third question, whether CBDCs would hasten cash's abolition, that I don't think it at all would hasten cash's abolition. Having this other form of money versus still having cash, I think they're just two separate decisions that people can, who are honest and think through the facts, can look and be like, all right, do I still have anonymity if we have CBDC, or do I still want the anonymity that cash provides? There's also like other social, cultural values to having cash. Like another thing that I didn't think about until just recently was I was looking over this presentation, getting ready for today, is the fact that with physical cash, we know that when you tip waiters or pizza delivery drivers with your credit card, your debit card, that is subject to tax. Whereas if you tip them in cash, that is not subject to tax. Well, it's supposed to be, because you're supposed to report your cash tips on your tax forms every April, but nobody does who works in the food service and so that's just one cultural purpose of cash. And I think there's just many motivations for abolishing cash to not be a thing. I mean, cash has lasted quite long, even through a lot of digitization. But that's just my personal opinion on that. But you can make your own. As to this fourth question, do CBDCs allow the government to spy on us any more than they already do? That's a good question. As we kind of know from Snowden and other things, that the government has a lot of power to acquire information. And I would and to answer this question generally, because privacy is greatly linked with the question as to how cryptocurrency technology works and how many people have to verify a transaction and so forth. A lot of it's related to whether CBDCs take the blockchain form. And I don't think they will. And so I think, no, so you won't have completely anonymous use. I do not think that CBDCs will be like cash, where I think you will have, if they will come into existence, that money will be money that will be linked with your name. That is my belief. And so given that it will be money linked by your name, potentially money linked with your name that you have right with the central bank, I think there's a good chance that, that at least there'd be less privacy in the sense that you're cutting a lot of links between you and the central and the government out. That, it would be probably easier if somebody had the power and authority, institutional authority to do so, for them to find out about you transferring money from one person to another. So that's just that. But these are questions that I think are important for us at the Alliance and other people interested in monetary reform to ponder on their own, looking into the future. I don't have complete answers to them. So yeah, and then this is just kind of expanding on that last point, is that, the more decentralized, I guess, the more privacy you could have, and reverse the more centralized and diminished privacy. Yeah, I think this is just echoing what I actually already said on the previous slide. The bottom line, how CBDC relates to sovereign money reform is that, CBDC ultimately is just a different form of money created by the central bank than what we have now. And if it is a debt-free form of money, it can be a form of money introduced that is like the money that would be created by the NEED Act, what we advocate for here at the Alliance. And if that type of money got created virtually by the government and people started using it, at least would get people to think about money differently, get more warmed up to the idea, I guess, of a sovereign money system. That's one argument from the Alliance perspective of a CBDC. But as a replacement for cash, there's still that concern. And so that and many other cons on the pro-con chart you can make in your head that I discussed throughout this presentation. So just as a conclusion, CBDC at the end of the day is a tool. It's just another form of money. What we exchange within, what we kind of like, how we codify value and exchange it among people. And I think it could be used for good or bad, depending on the nature of the institutions that are created around it. I think that's the big thing to take away, is that when I hear a CBDC in the news, I don't react gut-wrenchingly in favor or opposed to it, because I need to know, well, what institutions are created around it, and what form is it going to take? As we found out during this presentation, CBDC can mean many different things. And so that's the thought that I have as a conclusion after I've done my research on this topic. And yeah, that is pretty much the end of my presentation with all these notes here. And without further ado, I'm looking forward to a lot of questions, a lot of discussion and interaction. And I guess we can get started with the first person who has their hands up. Don Wilford again.
And hold on, Ben. Hold on, Wilford.
I need to stop sharing. I need to figure that out.
You can. Let me.
I can't. If I see it, there we go.
Okay, we're all back to the squares. First of all.
Okay, so I got my hand.
Yeah, hold on. We're going to moderate this. First of all, I want to convey my deepest apologies to everybody present for the distasteful intrusion that we experienced. As far as I know, this was the first time we experienced this. We've had heard before at other similar kinds of meetings that something like that could happen. Luckily, we were free from that for many years. So we might have to readdress some of our so-called security measures that we're taking. So we'll look into that. But again, on behalf of the whole team, my apologies for what happened, especially to Ben. That was quite terrible what happened there.
I dealt with it. It's fine. It was just shenaniganery and foolishness. It's fine.
There we go. Yes. I also want to apologize then that we took the measure to lock then the meeting. So some people tried to get in and were then denied access, but we got them in. At least Stephen Walsh and Howard Schweitzer got in. I have a feeling others might have tried to get in, but were not able to do so. So we might hear that later. But yes, without further ado, we'll go to the question and answer session. And we have Virginia that is keeping track of who is first. And as far as I know, Don Wilford is first. So Don, go ahead.
So I hope you can hear me. Look, I just wanted to make a comment about the privacy issue. And look, I'm Canadian, not American. And it just astounds me that people are more worried about government knowing what you're doing in your central bank account than you are worrying about Google and Apple knowing what you're doing if they introduce your private sector banks already know everything you're doing, and so does Visa and Amex and MasterCard. So, you know, this privacy thing is a bit of a stretch in my mind. It's just, well, anyway, let me leave it at that. Well, enough.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's like, you don't have to care about it. Like, it's just, I just named it as a thing that people care about. It's like, yeah, but you're right that you can see it, that the government knows what you're spending money on all the time. I go to a Insomnia Cookies in Kent, one of the great place, a lot of college town for cookies. And I get cookies, you know, and every time I buy cookies, I go on my laptop, I see an ad for Insomnia Cookies. And I'm like, wow, they know that they know the same people that, you know, Huntington Bank, where I put in my MasterCard and get those cookies, somehow is able to share information with Google pretty instantaneously as well, that, you know, that I bought those cookies, and Google could make immediate ad revenue about those cookies, you know? So yeah, I mean, if you don't care about MasterCard and Google knowing about your cookie purchases and cookie eating habits, I get why you also wouldn't care about the government knowing about that as well. I guess, similarly, you know, if it's like two different individuals that say I was funding like a radical group against the government, you know, I was giving money. Yeah. There's also a good point, Virginia. I think people do. There's also like ads for stuff that we're listening on, because, you know, I have an Amazon Echo right over here, and I know that I get ads for things that I've been saying. So it's kind of freaky, definitely. I'm kind of tolerable of it because it's like, it all seems like innocuous things that get offered to me. You know, I'm talking about backpacking. I get a backpack, get interest to me. But like, yeah, it's like, if you're not concerned about that, why are you concerned about the government? And I guess to be the devil's advocate, because I'm good at being the devil's advocate. I think Hovert knows that because I won Devil's Advocate Award in my Washington program class. I guess people can be concerned about the government knowing something versus a private entity knowing something, in the sense that government the state is a centralized, legitimized form of violence. You know, it's like, you know, the Google can't throw me in a prison or whatnot. And so people, there's this idea that, like, yeah, if you were only allowed to use a Fed account to fund money, and you wanted to give money over to, you know, a radical group, that the government could potentially find you out. If you could think of the FBI targeting the Black Panthers or so on or so forth. But even so, I don't see that much being a problem myself, especially if nobody's saying that a CBDC means that everybody does all their money exchanging through the government. Nobody is saying that. You could have existing forms of money with a CBDC. So to echo what Don said, I am not so much afraid of privacy with CBDC myself. But I thought it was important to bring up is it's a big part of the dialogue in a lot of circles. And, so that's it for that subject.
Yeah. I like to add, by the way, that any and all of the links that we're talking about will show up in the study stack that will get out in, I don't know, between 5 and 10 days. If Ben is fine with it, we can upload his PowerPoint presentation that it will be accessible for anybody who has then the study stack, which we'll send out to everybody who is on our newsletter list. So if you're not on our newsletter list, go to our website and sign up.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Virginia, who's next?
Nobody's on the list.
I don't see anybody.
I had a question, but I don't have a hand raise function under my reactions. I just have.
Oh, you were clapping, but that's okay. We'll interpret.
I don't have a hand raise. I don't know. I see what you're talking about, but I don't have one, so I don't know what to do.
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
No, I wanted to just comment on the debt-free aspect of what you're saying. Everything that I've seen does not really. I wouldn't classify it as debt-free. When they had the central bank digital currency in the first COVID bill, it had to be tracked as a liability. So it's not being created as an asset. Now, that's not to say that's not possible, but when it was proposed here, well, I don't know how long ago, over a year ago, it had to be recorded as a liability somewhere. So you couldn't just give it to somebody. They had to actually track it as a liability. And I've read that in other places also. Even though I think it could be perfectly fine as a sovereign money debt-free solution, I don't think that's where central banks are moving. I think they're just using that for the other reasons that you've talked about. That's it. Just
yeah, like I said, a central bank could lend money into your Fed account where you have to pay them back. At the same time, they could create money in your account. They could create the asset on their side of their balance sheet, just as they're creating your liability to you on the other side of the balance sheet. And would that be considered debt-free? I mean, it would be full reserve creation of money, which is different than sovereign money. And I think this is a distinction that often gets confused between sovereign money proposals versus other narrow banking full reserve proposals. But yeah, I just second what you said, Mark, is that it can be both. And I don't think that, you're right, the most circles, most elite circles of the people talking about central bank digital currency aren't exactly talking about making it debt-free. So good point. And yeah, so further questions.
We have Drazen as next. Drazen, go ahead. Hello.
Hey guys.
Good
Hello, everybody.
See you.
Good to see you all as well. It's been a while. Benjamin, thanks so much for the information. I did enjoy it. It's been a little while since I've looked into digital currency. But from my understanding, one of the main benefits that attracted me to digital currency is this decentralized model. And when I think about central bank digital currency, it goes towards a centralized model, right? Which poses security issues and basically making that system not really hacker proof, like a decentralized system where you have millions of miners around the world. And just the way the system is structured makes it almost impossible to hack, right? So that's one major concern that comes to my mind. And I'd like to hear, your opinion about, what you think about digital central bank digital currency. Are you in favor of it? Yeah, I'd like to add that.
Yeah, I'm not too much enthusiastic about it, lest it come with other reforms, like to the system. Yeah, I don't know. Because it just seems to give more information over to the central bank. And so what do you think, okay, what benefits are there to average citizens versus our current system? And I guess what one benefit could be financial inclusion, in the sense that, everybody, like it's kind of like a public option for banking. It would be easier for people to create an account. So I see pros and cons, but to be honest, I'm just not that excited about it either way. It does not, and the way most people are talking about it in the circles of people trying to suggest CBDC, I don't, I don't know necessarily if it's gonna like how fundamental its changes will be. I think its changes could be positive. It's just no, I'm just still mixed on the issue.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, can I continue just a little bit more?
Yeah, go ahead, Draz.
Yeah, so I'm finding it hard to understand what is the benefit for the people. I understand there's a benefit for the central bank to be able to monitor our transactions, but how do you convince the people that this is the right technology for them, where it really just gives the power to the central bank to monitor us? But I mean, people I'm in Canada as well, and people here, and I'm sure Americans are too, you guys are getting a check from the government, for at least the people in need. So there's a way for the government to give us money, right? So, I mean, what benefit do I get from getting central bank digital currency as opposed to getting a check in the mail?
I guess a benefit to central bank digital currency, there's actually a couple. So when you think about the check you get in the mail, you have to think about how that gets financed. With the case of the COVID-19 stimulus checks, those got paid out. How are they paid for? They were paid for, the government issuing bonds. They owe interest on those bonds. And that interest eventually has to be paid by the people in the form of tax. Whereas, with a central bank digital currency, you can put money, newly created money, right in the hands of the people, which is, I think a benefit. It's the same benefit as US money in the NEED Act, in the sense that if you think about it, in our current system, private banks are the people who first get to use newly created money in society. This gives them a disproportionate amount of power. Whereas with central bank digital currency, it's like regular citizens could be the first users of money of newly created money in the economy, which I guess gives more power to the people. Whereas your stimulus check, it's like the costs of that check get hidden, they're down the road, but it's ultimately get paid by taxpayers, which yes, you could tax the rich, but oftentimes, if you're paying for these stimulus checks and emergencies through debt, it's like not just the rich pay taxes. Taxes can be regressive in many cases, and you're owning, and who owns government bonds? Wealthy people. And so that's what makes central bank digital currency kind of preferable to stimulus checks as a way of getting money to people. So I really do see a benefit there. And the more I think about it, and it's like I am leaning towards it now, but I don't know. But the thing I originally said I was mixed because I don't know if that is the form that a central bank digital currency would take. If I could rely, there's a lot of if-thens. If I can have confidence that a monetary authority can be independent, and if I think the money would be created debt-free, in Fed accounts, then I could see it net having benefits in our current system. But, alternatively, if central banks are lending out this money to people and they're not, it's not given like a UBI or anything like that, it all depends on the form it takes. I think that's the big point I guess I wanted to make with my presentation.
Okay, right. In Canada, the central bank has the privilege to create loans to the federal, municipal, and provincial governments debt-free, right? So I'm not really understanding why can't America have the same system, without the central bank digital currency. right? Because I mean, I'm not really sure how they're planning to finance this central bank digital currency without the bonds. Like what, they just create it out of thin air and it has no effect on their balance sheets?
Yeah, I mean, all money at the fundamental level is created out of thin air. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, and this is where the importance of central bank independence would be, is that hopefully, if it's created out of thin air, it's created with inflation in mind. As you know, as central banks or monetary authorities are limited by their inflation mandates. So, yeah, I missed another part of your question there. I'm sorry. What else would you like? I guess what other questions might you have?
Well, I propose to move on. Sorry, Glass, we have some other people.
No problem.
So,
Thanks,
so we can come back to you. Also, a little request that if you have raised your question, to lower your hand again, so we can keep track. And so it's possible that Don kept his hand up because he had done so in the beginning, or he has another question. Don, you have another question? Otherwise, we'll go on to Joe Polito.
No, I have another question. So I wanted to say to Drazen that, you know, you can have a local small scale currency. You can have your own personal one. It's called an IOU, but nobody would accept it. So if you want money to be accepted generally, it's got to have a wide base. The reason why you need a central bank currency is that if you get a check in the mail, the central bank can't send you a check in the mail. All it can do is send money to a private sector bank, and they can send you a check in the mail. I mean, one of the problems with COVID was if you don't have a bank account, governments couldn't send you money. So the only way a central bank can send you money is for you to have your own personal account at the central bank. Then they can put money into your account. Look, a fundamental thing here, we're talking about central banks and private sector banks, and you know, you all may faint being Americans, but private sector banks create money for profit. Governments create money for free. So you could deal very happily, deal with your private sector banks. They charge you 20% on your credit card interest. They charge you, 5-7% on bank loans if you're lucky enough to get a loan. So the whole credit system in, the US is a usurious system. It's created for the financial elites. They take a slice of everything that you do. And credit card debt is 20% interest rate is absurd. Government money is free, guys. So you can take your choice. You can start using money at your central bank account with very low bank charges and low interest rates, or you can keep using private sector.
Okay, I think we lost Don, or he muted himself by accident. Ben, you want to add something to those observations? No?
Yeah.
We'll go on with Joe Polito. Joe, go ahead. And thank you for joining. We didn't know you had already joined another name.
I'm used to being thrown out of clubs. Ben, that was a great presentation. I don't know how long it took you to write that companion paper you posted on the website, but it would have taken me a year. It was really well done.
Thank you.
Michael Kumhoff said the CBDCs could be the little cousin of the Chicago. The Chicago plan itself would be a very difficult thing to institute, but through CBDC, much of the advantages could be obtained. I put a link in the chat. I haven't sent it yet, but it was a little bit of Michael Hudson's commentary to a question I asked him, and he had about 3 or 4 minutes of responses, and it's queued up at that space. And he said something that was really impressive because, you know, obviously he's an MMT guru, but he has had a relationship with the Chicago Plan and the NEED Act. He said the Chicago Plan, in my mind, would be part of monetary theory working through the banks. And he mentions in that conversation that the way the banks would get their extra inventory of money would be not to create it, but to borrow it from the central bank. And I guess that's sort of like the discount window anyway. So I've put that in there. And the other link I've put in is a paper by the Bank of Spain, which essentially makes the same kind of point, that the CBDC could be very much related to the Chicago Plan. And it mentions the Chicago Plan in its paper. So put those 2 resources in there. I think this is a great opportunity for groups like ours because the central bank is being forced to consider CBDC because of the cryptocurrencies. And they could lose considerable control of the money supply. This would be a very destabilizing thing for economies, kind of going back to the Wild West of currencies, the free bankers, and everybody issued their own currency and so forth. So I think it's something we have to look at and understand because of our own mission. Thank you very much again for the great presentation.
Thank you, Joe. And I have that's a lot of good commentary. And you bring up 2 good things, I guess I'd like to say in response to that commentary, 2 points that you made. One being, I'll start with your latter point first and then go to the former point. The point about like cryptocurrencies taking hold of our economy and supplanting our current currencies, and that CBDC could be a way to kind of push currency, like cryptocurrencies out, so people could, so governments don't lose control of their economies, right? So it's almost like CBDCs in that view are like kind of like improving the government's money product, so that it staves off that competitor of cryptocurrencies. And I guess I've heard other people who are in support of CBDC advance that point. And to be fair, I haven't read into that particular point that much, but my intuition on that point is that I don't really think that any adoption of CBDC would have an effect on the adoption of cryptocurrencies. Because I just look at the people, the types of people that use cryptocurrencies and the motivations they have for using cryptocurrencies. And none of those motivations, in my view, seem to diminish when you have a CBDC, unless like it's the type of CBDC that like is super anonymous and not attached to your identity. A CBDC that technologically mimics Bitcoin in every way. And I don't think that type of CBDC is likely for reasons we talked about before. Is I think if government would be afraid that type of CBDC gets used for narcotics and crime. And it's very energy intensive. So I don't think that, and then the types of people that use cryptocurrency, like, they use it because they're afraid of government, of like overrun government inflation. They buy it like, they're similar to gold bugs, except they're crypto bugs, and buying a lot of crypto. And I don't think, and like a lot of them are libertarians, they want to get away from the government. So I don't think CBDC diminishes use of crypto at all, but that's just kind of like my armchair opinion. But I'd love to engage on that topic further. This is my view of that topic, but that was your latter point. But your former point that CBDC could be almost like an introduction to sovereign money, I completely agree. It's like if you could create a Fed account and it's debt free in the sense that it's created just alongside an asset. It essentially creates the asset and the liability. It creates it out of thin air for individuals to use. Without any liability back to private banks, without having to pay back it's different than creating an asset and liability with loans because citizens wouldn't have to pay it back. I think creating money out of thin air in that way would open people's eyes a little bit to like, hey, government can create money out of thin air if it's limited in its powers. And because many people get scared by the idea of government creating money out of thin air because they get afraid of hyperinflation, right? So opening that door and having it CBDC first exist alongside the rest of our money system could make people warm up to the idea of sovereign money system. At least the change would make people think critically about what money is and how money works. So I think that is definitely, as you said, an important feature of it. And I agree with Coom Hawk's point in that regard. So yeah, thank you, Joe.
We'll first go to John Conroy, and then we go to Frans Verhagen. John, go ahead.
Yeah, in some ways you've already answered my question based on Drazen's question, but I was wondering, what is the problem that is solved by the CBDC? What is the central bank saying, they can do with CBDC that needs to be done? And I'm doubting that it's, that we can have a sovereign or debt-free money. I just have never heard that being bandied about. What are they thinking the advantage of this would be?
What are they thinking the advantage of it would be? As I mentioned, and I think, Joe Polito said in his previous point, a lot of them think it's a way to fight off cryptocurrencies, though I disagree with, and so they can not have more control over directing the economy and interest rates and economic transactions and so on, regulating demand. I don't really agree with that point. But the other point I made, which I don't know is really the point being made by many people proposing CBDC, would be the fact that, if it's created somewhat like a UBI in somebody's Fed account. But I hope everybody knows what UBI means. But I mean universal basic income, income money created out of thin air. It's like you don't have to worry about taxing or borrowing that, or citizens owing the interest like they do, which, when you, but I think a third point that I haven't already mentioned, and I think I haven't mentioned the Q&A session, but I mentioned during my PowerPoint slides, is that what monetary policy, monetary economists or, elites currently considering CBDC or considering, one benefit of it is the ability to act immediately. Because currently, our economy is guided by fiscal and monetary policy. Fiscal is tax and spending, Congress and the president controls that. But monetary policy, it's controlling interest rates and lending to influence economic activity. And currently, the Fed is limited in what it can do. As I said, they can influence interest rates, but private banks are ultimately the ones who create money through loans. They're the ones who directly add new money into the economy. And so this ability to act immediately and give the Fed more power to act immediately to try and increase demand or get spending or change economic activity, to many people that's seen as a plus of CBDC, is that ability to act immediately. And that could be if CBDC is created debt-free in the form of income. And it could also be if it was created, in the form of loans by a central bank. Either way, it's like it gives more power to the other one of the twin pillars of who affect, who tries to affect our economy in the government. It gives the monetary authority more power. And I guess that, another plus of that is so long as Congress is dysfunctional in its role, trying to support the economy through fiscal policy, giving more power to the monetary authority could be seen as a plus. It could also be seen as a minus if you think that power is going to be abused. But I think that's the third plus, is really it just gives our monetary authority that don't need majority like Congress does. Well, they're separate from the political process. They're a little more detached. It gives them more power to immediately, rather than long-term, affect economic activity.
Thank you. Thank you. We go on with Frans. Frans Verhagen, go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, I was wondering what you think about the following statement. Central bank digital currencies can be a way to Bretton Woods 3.0. Let me explain what I mean by this. When the first Bretton Woods was started at the end of World War II, they redid basically the international monetary system. Now there are people arguing that the pandemic basically has created such havoc to the world economy that we need another Bretton Woods. And so people start making all kinds of little reforms, and they call it Bretton Woods 2. I feel that we need a Bretton Woods 3, which really basically makes the financial system based upon public money creation, not private banks, and also have an international monetary system with a standard of a decarbonization standard. And so rather than having a reformist Bretton Woods number 2, I think that what we need, and which really basically coincides with the position of money of the alliance, is to have a Bretton Woods 3.0. And one additional comment, when we talk about a currency and people want to change a currency or add on, they really ought not to think currency, only currency, they ought to think system. And of course, being in a global world where which is financialized to the hilt, we have to think about an international monetary system. And so any kind of major change in the currency has to be considered also on the international level. So I was wondering what you think about that statement, and whether there are people in your particular readings that think along that kind of line.
Really good question, Franz. Thank you. And to answer the last part quite quickly, from all the people that I read, and I mostly informed this, I mean, all the stuff that's in my end notes was what informed everything that I presented and written. But from everybody that I've read, it's like, no, most people are not thinking along that line of thinking. I don't see much international cooperation being at all part of the dialogue of CBDC from what I've read. If anything, whenever international topics are brought up in regard to CBDC, it is in regard to competition between currencies and rather than international cooperation. As Jerome mentioned, I think in the chat section of the Zoom chat, there's this fear of China replacing the US's world reserve currency status. And China is surging ahead of the United States in terms of developing its central bank digital currency. Jerome Powell, Fed chair, I've read a couple of recent articles about him saying that, no, we're not going to move so fast in the CBDC. He's even said we don't need to be the first nation to do it. And China indeed does look to be the first nation to do it. And so that's something, and I could go on about that point, but to answer your particular question, it's just frankly, in terms of like CBDC as a way to bridge toward more international financial cooperation, I just haven't read anything on that subject. So I can't tell you anything more on that subject. I would love to read more, but that's just not related to most of the research that I've done.
Yeah, of course, the Bank of International Settlements, which is of course not a bank, a real bank. It's basically an advisory group to central banks. They are not really pushing any kind of international effort, because the financial elites, the international finance, they really like it in this way. They divide and conquer, you know? And so as long as people don't get together and start thinking in this kind of collaborative international way, we are not really making any progress. And that is what most of the financial haves are very interested in this. And that is also why the US is not so interested really to take a lead in this, because they are dominant in terms of reserves and dominant in terms of transaction currencies. So, and China, of course, wants to replace that. So, but I think it's an important kind of issue to look at this internationally. And that is basically what I'm writing on Bretton Woods 3.0. And that is, CBC are an important part of that.
I would love to read more about how CBDC could relate to more international financial cooperation. Yet I would say that I guess it's just easier to facilitate cooperation when you have less entities in need of cooperating. When I think of money being created more by the central bank and less money being created by private banks, if central banks have more power, I could see it being easier for there to be a cooperation. That's just a thought that's on top of my head. But I really have not thought about CBDC as something that is associated with cooperation. Well, I'm just going to read Virginia's comment. China is also ahead in the development of private marketplaces with their own currency. Yeah, imagine Amazon like a bank and the ability to control buying and selling. No, these are very good points, Virginia. Virginia made a very good point in the chat section that, yeah, CBDC is being used by China to increase its own influence. Because an example of this is in Africa, China is really trying to bridge its influence into various African countries, from what I've read, and allowing these entrepreneurs in poorer countries in Africa to have an account with the Chinese central bank is a way for China to increase its influence. As you know, oftentimes a big problem for entrepreneurs in poorer regions of the world is just access to capital and loans. Because you don't have established institutions for verifying trust and reliability of borrowers, whatnot. It's really hard to get access to capital. But China, being a central bank, unlike regular private banks, which are limited by profit and loss, China can create money as a government central bank out of thin air, and it can attach all these different stipulations when it's lending money to institutions in poorer countries that could influence its own power, its own use of its currency throughout the world. And as we all know, having reserve currency status gives the country a lot more power, a lot more ability to create, to finance many of its operations. And so, yeah, that is a big the context of China's motivation to be a reserve currency compared to the US, to have more influence internationally. It is, without doubt, a big part of the CBDC discussion. What I'm curious about, I guess I'd like to turn the question over to Franz. Could you explain to me, if you've researched how CBDC could be used to allow countries to cooperate? I know in Bretton Woods, as a refresher, in Bretton Woods, the US dollar was pegged to gold, and then all these other nations that like currencies were pegged to the US dollar. So in terms of, what these currencies were worth and what you could expect them to be worth, it was a lot of cooperation on that front. What I'm curious is, how do you think, because I haven't read anything about this, Franz, how do you think that CBDCs could increase some type of international financial cooperation?
No, first of all, it makes really people think about the basics of what money is. And that is the first step. And then if they understand a little bit about the usefulness of monetary reform and transformation, not only reform, but transformation, then they can start establishing at the climate conference in November, they can establish an international commission for monetary reform and transformation. And so part of that would be the whole issue of this new kind of central bank digital currencies, because everybody is talking about it, particularly the nations that have a high monetary sovereignty. A little nation in Africa, they have hardly any input in that. Though it's possible, depending how you set up the architecture. And so that is, and I would be happy to send you some information about that, because I don't want to really take all the time to explain this now, because there will be other questions.
Absolutely. I would love links sent to me, and perhaps links sent to everybody for this Zoom, this Coffeehouse meeting study stack. So thank you very much for your contribution, Franz.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll add all these ideas to the study stack. That's kind of the idea of the study stack, that half developed ideas here can be further explored. Because we get here in, sometimes very technical issues. For example, if we're talking about international cooperation, we can look at, what's going on in the European Communion or Union. You got a central bank there now of, the European Central Bank. If they create, sovereign money, what will be the key to allocate that to the different nations? Is it per capita, or is it maybe according to a rule that France is thinking of? If the greener you are, the more you can draw down. And here we're only talking about the European Union and its central bank. But the idea goes back also with Bretton Woods. Originally with, I think Keynes said, he wanted to introduce a real international currency called the Bancor. I don't know how it was tied then to maybe to gold or to a basket of currencies. I don't know, but I can see that idea can be revived again in a Bretton Woods 2.0, or as Franz is talking about, in a Bretton Woods 3.0. But here, I'm getting out of my league in being able to wrap my mind around the complexities all involved. So if anybody else here has something of a view, a vision of what could be done on an international level, I know that all the monetary reform organizations are their aim is a national law to change their money system, but there isn't maybe that much going on a really truly international level. So I think John Conroy, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, some history. There was a coin called the Stella that was proposed as an international coin. That was sometime during the 1800s. So there was some talk about an international money like that. And if you look up the Stella, S-T-E-L-L-A, I think you'll find information on an international coin that never came to be. But the big thing with some type of international currency is the loss of sovereignty for a nation. So you know, with having our own money here in the United States, we have a great deal of sovereignty, and we can have that money go up or down in value relative to other currencies. And that's in many ways power that we want to exercise from time to time. And the big knock on the European Union was that when some zone got into trouble and needed to devalue, they couldn't do it. They were at the mercy of the group, and their national sovereignty was impeded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're referring here to the Greek situations, for example.
And also, I think Spain. It might have been good for Spain to devalue, but they couldn't.
And they got hit very hard in that crisis. I mean, at a certain moment, they had up to 40% unemployment amongst their youth. And the Greeks couldn't do anything about, you know, that all their assets were basically being bought up by foreigners. Point taken. Point taken.
Yeah, I think,
but yeah, if anybody else has ideas there, you know, put it in the chat. Then through the chat, it can get into the study stack. And I know that Joe, like me, have a good nose to find sources also to add to these kinds of discussions. I'm sure Ben will still find more sources. Anybody else? Still another question, Franz?
Yeah, particularly if you talk about sources, I think one of the most inspiring books that I'm reading at this moment and has very good reviews is the book by for heaven's sake, what's his name now? It's called Price of Peace, and the name is Carter. And it's a biography of Keynes. And the beauty of that is that he really explains the intellectual development, not only the political involvement of Keynes with after World War I and particularly World War II, but for particular the time when he was writing his treatise on money, which most people think less valuable than the general theory. And so I think it is a marvelous book, and particularly also for people who are not too familiar with these kind of international issues. So I would strongly recommend that to add to the stack.
Yeah, thank you. Bruce Wall, you had your hand up, you were clapping. You have a question or comment? Please unmute.
I just, the reference to international versus sovereign money and the reference to Greece and Italy as examples, or whatever the other one was. I believe that Yanis Varoufakis really is relevant to that. He's not been talked about monetary reform, but the issues are well beyond monetary reform. And he's an economist, and so he's relevant to the discussion. And I've been curious about how he's relevant. And this discussion made it clear to me. I can't explain it, but I know that he's relevant. That's all. Because he was the Greek finance minister for 6 months, and he spent his entire time trying to resolve and he's committed. He was committed throughout that to the international, despite the fact that they were screwing the Greeks. And in fact, that was his major bargaining chip, was that he was not trying to pull out. He was not trying to get the Greeks out. He was trying to reinforce the internet, at least the European Union. So that's all.
Opens 10 a.m. Tuesday. We have tech map.
You want to address that, Ben? Anything that's in your background that you can add to that? Otherwise, we'll go on with Joe.
Nope.
Joe Polito, and after that we'll have Lucille. Joe?
Yeah, I quite agree with Bruce. Giannis is somebody who should be very paid attention to. My middle daughter took me to a monk debate. It's on the internet, and he was a part of it along with David Brooks and others, and he was brilliant. And he does consider money creation and so forth, for sure. While we're thinking outside the box, well, before I say that, Ben's point about the cryptocurrencies not necessarily being affected by the CBDC and type of people are interested in it and so forth. I do think, what he's talking about is criminals and some idealistic libertarians, and they do need to be regulated. And perhaps more importantly, it's kind of like climate change. I had a truly brilliant friend, engineering friend, who had really understood the climate change thing in it and had seen some of those issues long before it became popular. And he still wasn't sure that man-made climate change was the issue. But he said he was behind a strong response to climate change because we couldn't take the chance that he was wrong. And I think the same is true for the cryptocurrencies. I think they hold a tremendous potential for problems, and the authorities need to be very cautious. And CBDCs would help. The other point I want to make, while we're thinking outside the box, this group is very much about monetary reform, but one of its members, Dan Sullivan, is also into Henry George a great deal. And what I've come to realize in listening to presentations by him and the Henry George School and so forth, is that we also should be putting some emphasis on the Henry George approach. There's a tremendous amount of economic rent, unearned income, of course, is the big issue, both in banking and in real estate. And if we succeed in moving things more toward the beneficial public use of money for the people, and have job guarantees and provide a lot of goods and services and wealth creation, a lot of that will be siphoned off by economic rent. People will bid up the price of houses more and land, and the land baron situation will continue to reign. That money does need to be taxed away and redistributed to the communities that create the true value of the land. And I think we need to think in terms of a lot of our effort would be wasted if we don't also address economic rent, the rentier economy. Michael Hudson was interviewed by, I think about a year ago, by I don't know, the International Monetary Group or something, and this group was a part of that. And that's a major point on his part, and I think he's right on. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe. Yeah, Joe, because you're in charge of the study stack, and I gave you the little secret that you can add some of your own interests into the study stack, of course. Yeah, so put some Henry George items in it again. It's always good to have a little refresher on that. Let's move on to Lucille. Lucille, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think I have 3 points I want to make. First, just to commend and thank Ben for the presentation today, for your paper. I haven't read the final version that's on the website, but I will, partly because I didn't follow all of your presentation and I need to read up on it more, but I did read the earlier version and just want to thank you for your work and encourage you to continue it. I guess what comment is similar to what Mark Young expressed earlier. I was actually pretty surprised in your presentation that even though it seemed to be that central bank digital currency is all over the place, and that's sort of will be my third point, that it means all things to all people in some ways, or it can mean whatever different people are talking about it to mean. But it did come across in what you shared that some people think it is debt-free, and that's a little bit news to me that central banks, I agree with Mark and what others said, that it should and easily can be debt-free and can be a public asset money, spent, lent, invested, given into circulation. But I'm surprised that that would be what the central bank focused on the commercial sector banks are up to. And then the third point is that how can it be all things to all people, and what's sort of going on with that, in the sense that when something does come through, you know, different people are going to think, oh, this is what it is, and it's not that. And maybe it's just that it's still so much in the formative stage that different people are meaning different things by it. But it is to a normal person, and you know, maybe a little bit more informed than some people on money stuff, but it's pretty confusing. So I guess I need homework to do, but then I also wonder, is the confusion part of the plan? And that concerns me and worries me. So those are my three comments.
Yeah, so to comment on a couple of points. So I don't think the confusion is part of any plan. At least I can't see a plan for the confusion. I guess I'm working backwards from your third to your second point. But I don't know how all the confusing language about CBDC came to be. Perhaps in my research, I should have looked more at the genealogy of CBDC. Like, I don't know who's the first person to use the term. I don't even know that answer to that question. I just kind of looked comprehensively through all these different articles from trusted sources, you know, and enlarge who's talking about it, and that I just discovered what I found. Yeah, I mean, it's like as I said at the beginning, ultimately it's central bank money, and I just took the BIS definition at its face, because Bank for International Settlements is as reputable as any other major financial institution. They said it's money created by a central bank, different than the current forms. So that's kind of what I took, and then I looked at all the different forms and ran with that. But in regards to whether it is debt-free, again, that just depends on how it's created. So you just have to look at what, even that's what that. So when somebody's saying, "Well, I want to create a CBDC," like inquire, ask questions. Well, who, on what balance sheet will it appear? Will it be loaned out? Will it be like what are the guidelines of the Fed's authority creating CBDC? Those are the types of questions you just got to ask. But in regards to whether it's debt-free or whether that's what elites are talking about, I would consider, if a central bank is giving people money, not as a loan, but as pure income, you know, and they're creating an asset alongside the liability, not like they do a loan, but they just create create it as they would in full reserve banking. I would consider that debt-free, because people are receiving new money without owing it back to somebody. I guess it's not debt-free in the sense that it's still considered a liability of the central bank, but it's created alongside an asset of equal value. So but that's just one. I have read, like, you know, I guess elitist sources, banks, financial institutions talking about potentially a central bank being able to create a UBI, but it's all talk, really. I don't see the U.S. I don't see anytime soon in the United States people tolerating or wanting a central bank to be able to give citizens directly money in differing amounts. I don't see it being a thing anytime soon in the U.S. And where I'm seeing central bank digital currency currently being deployed is, you know, like how the Chinese government is using it in the form of loans. So still as debt, but rather than being created as debt in private bank loans, being created as debt in central bank loans. That's how it's being done in China. And that's a good point to make. I think I was incorrect in my initial presentation saying that, well, in most cases it's debt-free. Well, no, not in most cases. I changed that when I sent the study stack to Hover. In fact, Hover, I just recently sent you a PDF version of that PowerPoint. But to many cases. But when I'm talking about cases, I'm just talking about central bank digital currency currently is all talk. It's in its infancy stage. So I think you are right to say that where it is being currently rolled out, it is not something that's debt-free. It's not something that's like US money. It's only in all these theoretical ideas that people are bringing up in different circles that it is debt-free money. So that's kind of, I hope that answers your two major points or questions. And regarding your first point, thank you so much for the opportunity I've had. I've enjoyed the work I've been able to do with you guys, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. So, yeah, would you like to follow?
We're gonna wrap that up. We're at 9 o'clock, and we will revisit it. Ben, you're welcome to change your PowerPoint, even make edits still on your article online. Joe, I hope you made a lot of notes, so we will have an interesting study stack. I wish Ben a great time in New Mexico, where he will retreat into the wilderness for some deserved recreational time. I also want to say and thank, because at this moment, this was the last coffee house where I was a little bit the captain of the whole team. The new captain taking over again is Bo Young. But I just want to say that, you know, we got quite a team ready here to make this all possible. Bo Young as a captain, Carly, she's involved. Chris, he was the great technician tonight, saving us from some further trouble maybe. Liam, who is on and off. Virginia, who is mostly on. And Mary, so it's quite a team, and I just want to say thank you on behalf of the whole alliance for what you're doing, and of course Mark Young is part of it. Let's not forget him. There will be another coffee house. This will be one of our Snap coffee houses on June the 7th, so that is in 2 weeks. It's on a Monday. It's on the same time, and we'll have again Jeff Eder of Progressive Money Canada. And he made some good breakthroughs in tackling and refuting some of the core claims of MMT. And as MMT is one of our, you know, I don't know, competitors in the field, it's always good to get some weapons in your hand to club those MMTers with some good ideas. So I'm very much looking forward to that one. I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. Anything else to be added to that? No, as I said, Study Stack will be out between 5 and 10 days. There will be a newsletter in mid-June with a lot of information, of course, then coming up about our festival. and whatever else we are cooking up in our little alliance kitchen. With that, Benjamin, good night. Everybody else, thanks for attending. Hope to see you in 2 weeks again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.